My name is Kyle, I'm 34, and my wife, Melissa, is 31. We've been married for 8 years, and on the surface, it's always seemed like we had it all together. A nice house in the suburbs, 2 adorable dogs, and matching holiday sweaters every Christmas. But beneath the Instagram-perfect exterior, cracks were forming, and I was too blind or maybe too trusting to see them. Melissa has always had a sharp tongue, but I chalked it up to her being assertive. She's the type who always needs to win an argument, and I used to find her fiery personality charming in the early days. It's funny how something that once felt like passion can curdle into something toxic. Over time, the little lies started piling up, innocuous things like, "Oh, I was at the gym," when her car wasn't there, or "This dress was on sale," when I found the full price tag crumpled in the trash. I dismissed these as quirks. Everyone bends the truth now and then, right? But in hindsight, these small lies were warning signs I ignored because I believed in us. I believed in her. That trust would turn out to be my biggest mistake. Lately, things had felt different. She was on her phone constantly, giggling at texts she wouldn't explain, or claiming it was just a group chat. She started working late more often, but her paycheck didn't reflect the overtime. When I asked her about it, she'd roll her eyes and tell me not to be paranoid. A part of me knew something was off. But when you love someone, you convince yourself of their innocence, even when the evidence is staring you in the face. I didn't want to believe the woman I promised forever to could be lying to me about something bigger than a dress or a gym visit. I was wrong. So very wrong. The truth hit me on a random Wednesday evening. I got home early from work. My boss let us out early because the office Wi-Fi was down. Melissa hadn't expected me back so soon. I knew this because when I walked in the door, she wasn't in the living room or the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of laughter coming from upstairs. I figured she was watching a show, but when I got closer, I realized she wasn't alone. I crept up the stairs, each step heavier than the last as my stomach churned with a feeling I couldn't yet name. Her voice, light, flirtatious, was coming from our bedroom. I stopped at the door. It was cracked open just enough for me to see her sitting on the edge of our bed, phone in hand, grinning like she was in some rom-com. But it wasn't a show. She was on a video call with someone. A man. "Stop it," she giggled. "You're going to get me in trouble." Her tone was the one she used to reserve for me when we first started dating. I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest and stomped on. My brain screamed for me to barge in, to demand answers, but my body betrayed me. I stood frozen, listening to her murmur sweet nothings to a stranger in the same room where I'd once whispered my own promises to her. I backed away slowly and sat at the top of the stairs, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My mind was racing. Who was this guy? How long had this been going on? How could she do this to me? I waited until her laughter subsided and the call ended. She walked out of the room and jumped when she saw me sitting there. "Oh, you scared me?" she said, clutching her chest. She had that fake smile plastered on her face, the one she used when she was trying to hide something. "What are you doing home so early?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, my voice flat. She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "What do you mean?" That was the moment I realized how deep her lies ran. She wasn't going to admit it. I stood up, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "Who were you talking to just now?" Her face turned a shade paler. She stammered, "Oh, that was just Stacy, from work. You know how she is, always calling to gossip. Funny, because you didn't mention Stacy has a deep voice and flirts like a teenager." Her jaw tightened, and for a split second, the mask slipped. But she quickly recovered, crossing her arms and saying, "You're being ridiculous, Kyle. Are you seriously accusing me of something just because I was on the phone?" That's when I decided to dig deeper. She thought she could outsmart me, but I wasn't going to let her lies slide anymore. After Melissa brushed past me and retreated downstairs, I stayed planted at the top of the stairs, my mind racing. Her reaction confirmed what I already knew. She was hiding something. I didn't confront her further right then. Instead, I decided to gather irrefutable proof. If she wanted to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy, I was going to make sure I had receipts to shove in her face. That night, I waited until she fell asleep. Melissa always crashed hard after her late work nights, and I knew I had time to search undisturbed. With my heart pounding, I picked up her phone from her nightstand. I knew her passcode. She used her birthday because she could never remember anything else. The screen unlocked, and for a moment, I just stared at it, my thumb hovering over her messages. Part of me hoped I wouldn't find anything. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just paranoid. But then I opened her texts, and my heart sank. There it was, a conversation with someone saved as Adam Work. The messages were anything but professional. Adam, can't stop thinking about earlier. You looked so hot in that dress. Melissa, you're such a tease. I could barely focus with you around today. The texts went back for months. Explicit ones, flirty ones, even ones mocking me. Adam, what did you tell him you were doing tonight? Melissa, I told him I was working late, lol. He's so clueless. I scrolled further and found pictures. Pictures of her in lingerie I'd never seen before, taken in our bedroom. Felt like someone had poured acid on my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. But the final nail in the coffin was a flight confirmation email I found in her email app. She and Adam had booked a weekend getaway at a resort just a few hours away, one that I had mentioned wanting to visit for our anniversary. They were set to leave in 2 weeks. I wanted to scream, but instead, I carefully put the phone back where I found it. She stirred slightly, mumbling something in her sleep. I stared at her face, wondering how I'd ever thought I could trust her. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the living room, running through every moment of our marriage, trying to figure out how it had come to this. I thought about the times I'd put her needs above mine, the sacrifices I'd made to make her happy, the lies she'd fed me in return. But I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. If she thought she was going to skip off into the sunset with Adam, she had another thing coming. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. Melissa got up, groggy as usual, and went about her routine. She kissed me on the cheek as she left for work, a kiss that felt like a slap to my face now that I knew the truth. I gritted my teeth and played along, all the while planning my next move. That evening, when she got home, I was waiting for her in the kitchen. I'd poured myself a drink, scotch, neat, and I sat at the counter, swirling it idly. She walked in, all smiles, holding takeout bags. "Hey, babe," she chirped. "I got your favorite. Figured you deserved a treat." The sheer audacity of her pretending like everything was fine made my blood boil. But I stayed calm. "Thanks," I said, gesturing for her to sit down. "But we need to talk." Her smile faltered, but she covered it quickly. "Oh? About what?" I slid her phone across the counter. "About this." Her face went blank for a moment, then she laughed nervously. "Why do you have my phone? Why don't you open it and check your messages with Adam Work?" I said, my voice like ice. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. She unlocked it, likely hoping to delete something, but it was too late. I'd already forwarded the damning messages and pictures to myself. "Explain," I demanded. She froze, her eyes darting between me and the phone like a cornered animal. "Kyle, it's not what you think." I slammed my hand on the counter. "Not what I think. I read the messages, Melissa. I saw the pictures, the plans for your little romantic getaway. Don't insult me by pretending there's an innocent explanation." Her demeanor shifted. The fake contrition melted away, replaced by defiance. "Okay, fine. Yes, I've been talking to Adam, but you don't understand. I was lonely. You're always working, and we've been drifting apart. I needed someone who paid attention to me." I laughed bitterly. "Lonely? Are you serious? I've bent over backward for this marriage, Melissa. You're the one who's been lying and sneaking around." She stood up, arms crossed, and shot back. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your job, I wouldn't have needed to find comfort elsewhere." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. I stood up and loomed over her. "Don't you dare put this on me. You made a choice. You disrespected me, our marriage, and everything we built. You could have talked to me. Instead, you chose him." Her lips quivered, but she didn't say anything. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. But I wasn't interested in hearing more lies. "You know what?" I said, my voice calm but cold. "You don't have to explain anything else. I already know exactly who you are." She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. "Kyle, please. We can fix this." I shook my head.
No, Melissa.
"You already broke it." After our confrontation, Melissa went into full damage control mode. She started leaving sticky notes around the house that said things like, "Love you," and "Let's talk tonight." She offered to cook dinner more often, though her idea of cooking was reheating frozen meals. I knew what she was doing, trying to act like the perfect wife to convince me to forget everything. But I wasn't going to forget, and I certainly wasn't going to forgive. I started planning my next steps, and I decided that if she was going to lie and betray me, she deserved a taste of her own medicine. But my revenge wouldn't be messy or impulsive. I wanted to be smart about it. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I explained the situation, and he advised me to start gathering as much evidence as possible. "If you want to walk away from this without losing your shirt," he said, "you need to play it cool and document everything." So I did just that. I spent the next week quietly collecting proof. Screenshots of her texts, bank statements showing money spent on dinners I wasn't at, even security footage from our smart doorbell showing her leaving the house in the middle of the night. Every piece of evidence went into a neat little folder on my laptop titled Melissa's Lies. Next, I started looking into Adam. It didn't take long to find him. Social media makes it ridiculously easy to track people down. He wasn't some suave playboy like I imagined. He was a mediocre-looking guy who posted endless gym selfies and motivational quotes. But here's the kicker. Adam had a wife. Her name was Sarah, and her profile was full of pictures of the two of them. Vacations, anniversaries, even a post about their recent attempt to have a baby. My stomach twisted at the thought of Melissa being part of their lives, knowing what she was helping destroy. I considered reaching out to Sarah right away but decided against it. I needed to time it perfectly. Meanwhile, Melissa was oblivious to my preparations. She kept up her charade, occasionally hinting that we should go away for the weekend or reconnect as a couple. I played along, giving her just enough hope to think I was buying her act. But the whole time, I was laying the groundwork for something bigger. She thought she was in control, but she had no idea that the rug was about to be pulled out from under her. I wasn't just going to end this marriage. I was going to expose every lie she'd ever told, and I was going to make sure that neither she nor Adam came out of this unscathed. With my plan in place, I waited for the right moment to strike. The opportunity presented itself when Melissa left her laptop open one morning while she was in the shower. I knew she used it for video calls, and sure enough, there was a string of chats between her and Adam. What caught my eye was their conversation about their upcoming getaway, the same one I'd found in her email. They were giddy about their plans, even debating whether to tell their respective spouses the trip was work-related, or just ghost us entirely for the weekend. That's when it hit me. I didn't need to wait for the getaway to expose them. I could ruin everything they thought they'd gotten away with long before they ever packed their bags. First, I messaged Sarah, Adam's wife. I didn't go in guns blazing. I wanted to handle this carefully. I sent her a polite but direct message.
Isara, Imkila, Melissa Zuzban.
I recently discovered that my wife has been having an affair with someone named Adam. I believe he's your husband. I've gathered proof, and I wanted to share this with you so you can make your own decisions about what to do next. I attached a few screenshots, just enough to confirm my story without overwhelming her. Within minutes, she replied, "Oh my God, I don't know what to say. Thank you for telling me. Can we talk?" We ended up having a long phone call. Sarah was devastated but also furious. She confirmed that Adam had been acting suspiciously for months, and she'd even found a charge for lingerie on his credit card that she knew wasn't for her. Together, we decided to confront them. Together. The day before their planned getaway, Sarah and I coordinated a surprise meeting. She convinced Adam to come home early under the pretense of having an important conversation. Meanwhile, I told Melissa I had a surprise for her and asked her to meet me at a local cafe. When the day came, I walked into the cafe and spotted Melissa sitting at a table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled, but her expression quickly shifted when Sarah walked in behind me. "Who's this?" Melissa asked, her voice tense. "This is Sarah," I said, sitting down across from her. "Adam's wife." Melissa's face turned ashen. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Sarah wasted no time. She pulled out her phone, slapping it on the table with the incriminating texts and photos displayed. "Care to explain this?" Melissa stammered, trying to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. The more she tried to talk her way out of it, the deeper she dug her own grave. As Sarah unleashed her fury, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction watching Melissa squirm. This was the first time in our entire relationship that she wasn't in control of the narrative. But the best part? While this confrontation was happening, Sarah's brother, who worked security at the hotel where Melissa and Adam had booked their getaway, was canceling their reservation and forwarding all their messages to their respective employers. Melissa thought she was sneaky, but she never saw this coming. The confrontation at the cafe ended with Melissa storming out, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She muttered something about needing time to process, as she grabbed her bag and fled. Sarah and I stayed behind, sipping our coffee in silence for a moment. It was a strange, surreal camaraderie. Two strangers united by betrayal. Later that night, Melissa came home. She tried to act composed, but her voice cracked when she said, "We need to talk." I sat down on the couch, arms crossed. "Oh, now you want to talk? I made a mistake," she began, her voice trembling. "It didn't mean anything. It was just a distraction. I want to fix this, Kyle. I love you." Her sudden display of regret might have tugged at my heartstrings a few weeks ago. But now I saw it for what it was: desperation. "Love me?" I said, laughing bitterly. "Was that before or after you mocked me to Adam? Before or after you booked a romantic getaway with him using our anniversary plans?" She burst into tears, sobbing about how lonely she'd felt, how she thought I didn't care anymore. The blame shifting was almost impressive in its audacity. "I don't care why you did it," I said, cutting her off. "You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. And now you get to deal with the consequences." Her tears dried up at that. "What do you mean, consequences?" "You'll find out soon enough," I said, standing and heading to the bedroom. I needed space to think, and I didn't want to listen to any more of her excuses. The next few days were a whirlwind. Melissa tried everything: texting, leaving notes, even calling my mom to try to sway her to her side. But I wasn't budging. Meanwhile, Sarah had unleashed her own storm on Adam. From what I heard, he had no clue how Sarah had found out and tried to deny everything. But she had all the evidence she needed. She kicked him out of their house that same day, filing for divorce immediately. But the biggest blow came when their employers got involved. Sarah's brother had made sure that all their messages and photos were forwarded to HR. Since both Adam and Melissa worked for the same company, the fallout was swift. An office romance was against company policy, and both were promptly fired. Melissa came home that evening, her face red and blotchy. "They fired me," she said, throwing her bag onto the floor. "How could you do this to me?" "To you," I snapped. "Melissa, you did this to yourself. You threw away your marriage, your integrity, and now your job. Don't try to make me the villain here." She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. For the first time, she looked genuinely defeated. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. After Melissa's firing, things between us hit an all-time low. She went from being tearful and apologetic to angry and spiteful. It was as though she resented me for not rolling over and pretending everything was fine. She started throwing out passive-aggressive comments about how vindictive I was or how I never truly loved her. If I could do this to her. I ignored her. I wasn't wasting energy on someone who had zero accountability for their actions. Instead, I poured my focus into the next step: divorce. My lawyer helped me file the paperwork, and I made sure it was served to her in the most public and humiliating way possible. She received the papers at her gym during one of her morning yoga classes. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Melissa called me immediately after, screaming into the phone. You couldn't just hand me the papers at home like a normal person? She spat. Why start doing things the normal way now? I replied before hanging up. At this point, our communication was minimal. I stayed in the house while we sorted out the legalities, but I made it clear that our marriage was over. Melissa alternated between trying to charm her way back into my good graces and lashing out with insults whenever I didn't play along. It was exhausting, but I held firm. The real turning point came when I met with Sarah again, this time to return some of the evidence I'd borrowed. We decided to grab coffee, and it was refreshing to talk to someone who truly understood what I was going through. Unlike Melissa, Sarah owned her emotions, her anger, her hurt, her determination to move forward. She mentioned that she'd started seeing a therapist to process the betrayal. It's helped a lot, she said. I didn't realize how much I'd been ignoring my own needs in that relationship. Her words stuck with me. I realized I'd been doing the same thing with Melissa for years, sacrificing my happiness to accommodate her whims. That night, I researched therapists and scheduled my first session. It felt like the first real step toward reclaiming my life. Melissa, on the other hand, was spiraling. With no job and no support from me, she started drinking more and staying out late, coming home at odd hours. I wasn't sure if she was trying to provoke me or just drowning in her own mess, but I didn't care. I was done. One morning, I woke up to find her packing her things. I'm leaving, she announced, as though she were the one taking the high road. This place is toxic. Good, I said, not even looking up from my coffee. Don't forget your lies and betrayal on the way out. She glared at me but didn't say another word. By noon, she was gone. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in months. The day Melissa moved out felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The house, once a minefield of tension and lies, was finally mine again. A quiet, empty space that I could rebuild into something better. It was strange at first, walking past the now empty closet where her clothes used to hang or seeing the bare spots on the wall where her decorations had been. But with every box she took, it felt like she was also taking pieces of the chaos she'd brought into my life. I focused on cleaning up, literally and figuratively. I cleared out everything that reminded me of her. The pictures, the mementos from anniversaries, the ridiculous throw pillows she insisted on buying, all of it went into a donation pile or the trash. It was cathartic, like I was purging her from my life one item at a time. The divorce process moved quickly after she left. With the evidence I'd collected and her job loss cutting into her resources, Melissa had no room to fight. We finalized the divorce within a couple of months, and I made sure the settlement was fair but firm. She walked away with some cash, but the house and most of our shared assets stayed with me. In the meantime, Sarah and I kept in touch. At first, our conversations were purely supportive, two people helping each other navigate the fallout of a mutual betrayal. But over time, our talks became more personal. We'd share stories about our lives before the chaos, our hopes for the future, and what we'd learned from this mess. One evening, after weeks of exchanging texts and calls, Sarah suggested we meet up again, not for coffee, but for dinner. I hesitated at first, unsure if I was ready for anything even remotely resembling a date. But something about Sarah felt different. She wasn't just another person trying to fill a void. She was someone who understood the cracks and scars left behind by betrayal. That dinner was one of the best nights I'd had in years. We laughed, we shared, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of something I thought I'd lost hope. As for Melissa, I heard through the grapevine that she tried to reconnect with Adam after her life imploded, only to find that Sarah had thoroughly cut him out as well. He'd lost his house, his wife, and his reputation, and last I heard, he'd moved back in with his parents. I couldn't muster much sympathy for him or Melissa. They'd made their choices, and now they were reaping the consequences. It's been nearly a year since everything fell apart, and looking back now, I can honestly say I'm better off. At first, I thought the betrayal would consume me, that I'd never trust anyone again. But I've learned something important. Healing isn't about erasing the pain, but about accepting it as part of your story and letting it make you stronger. Melissa and I haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized, and I have no interest in changing that. I don't hate her anymore. I'm just indifferent. She was a chapter in my life, one that taught me valuable lessons about boundaries, trust, and the kind of person I don't want to be with. Sarah and I, we're still taking things slow, but it feels good, natural. She's not a rebound or a distraction. She's someone who gets it, who sees the broken pieces and doesn't shy away from them. We've even joked about how our exes inadvertently brought us together, turning the worst experiences of our lives into something unexpectedly good. For anyone reading this who's going through something similar, my advice is simple. Don't ignore the red flags. Love makes you blind, yes, but trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. And if you do find yourself betrayed, know that it's not the end of your story. It's just a new beginning. I've learned that you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond. You can let the betrayal define you, or you can use it as fuel to build a life that's better, stronger, and more authentic. So here I am, sitting in my quiet, peaceful house, 2 happy dogs at my feet, and a future that finally feels like it belongs to me. Melissa tried to break me, but in the end, she only set me free. And for that, I'm almost grateful. Almost. Thank you for reading. If this resonates with anyone out there, just know you're not alone. You're stronger than you think. And there's always a way forward, even when the path feels impossibly dark. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.